Anacondas. The Hunt for the Blood Orchid was released in 2004 as a standalone sequel to the 1997 creature feature Anaconda. The film featured a relatively modest ensemble cast, most of whom were either emerging actors or seasoned professionals still seeking their mainstream breakthrough. While it did not boast A-list Hollywood celebrities, the casting brought together a diverse group of performers who brought depth and energy to their roles. The ensemble's dynamic chemistry helped carry the narrative, compensating for some of the film's limitations in special effects or originality. The leading role of Dr. Jack Byron was played by Matthew Marsden, a British actor and former singer who had previously appeared in films such as Black Hawk Down and had a recurring role on the long-running UK soap opera Coronation Street. Prior to Anacondas, Marsden had been typecast in supporting or military roles, often portraying stoic or morally ambiguous characters. His performance in Anacondas as a profit-driven expedition leader marked a continuation of that trend. Marsden's portrayal of Jack Byron was cold, calculating, and ambitious, a man more interested in the lucrative potential of the Blood Orchid than the safety of his team. This role allowed him to showcase a more sinister edge, building upon the intensity he had cultivated in earlier military roles. While the film did not significantly elevate Marsden's career in terms of box office impact or critical acclaim, it cemented his niche in genre films and led to later action-oriented projects such as Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen. Morris Chestnut played Gordon Mitchell, the financial backer of the expedition and an audience favorite for his grounded demeanor and charismatic screen presence. Chestnut had already made a name for himself with standout performances in Boys and the Hood, The Best Man, and Two Can Play That Game. By the time Anacondas was released, Chestnut had developed a strong following among both mainstream and African-American audiences. His presence in the film lent it a measure of credibility and appeal. Gordon Mitchell was arguably one of the more relatable and likable characters, and Chestnut's portrayal balanced skepticism, humor, and survival instinct. Although Anacondas didn't push his career to new heights, it showcased his versatility and helped maintain his visibility in both action and horror genres during the mid-2000s. KaDee Strickland took on the role of Samantha Rogers, the expedition's herpetologist. Prior to this film, Strickland had appeared in supporting roles in films like Something's Gotta Give and The Grudge, building a reputation for being a strong female presence. Anacondas offered her one of her earliest leading roles, providing an opportunity to break away from minor or romantic side characters. Her portrayal of Samantha brought a mixture of intelligence, resilience, and compassion, often acting as the moral center of the group. Strickland's performance was a notable standout, and although the film did not receive critical acclaim, it helped propel her toward more prominent roles, most notably in the television series Private Practice. Her transition from creature features to primetime drama highlights the stepping stone that Anacondas became in her trajectory. Eugene Byrd portrayed Cole Burris, the tech-savvy team member who provided comic relief and occasional insight during high-stress situations. Byrd had previously worked on TV shows like Crossing Jordan and NYPD Blue, where he often played street-smart or eccentric characters. His role in Anacondas capitalized on his ability to blend humor with tension, bringing levity to otherwise dire moments. While the role was somewhat limited in development, it aligned well with Byrd's typical character type and sustained his presence in Hollywood. He later went on to voice Delmont Del Walker in the Gears of War video game series and played Dr. Clark Edison in the long-running TV show Bones, indicating a steady, if not spectacular career trajectory post-Anacondas. Nicholas Gonzalez played Dr. Ben Douglas, the team's optimistic and somewhat idealistic scientist. Gonzalez had previously gained recognition through television appearances in series such as Resurrection Boulevard and Law and Order, SVU. His character in Anacondas was marked by a strong ethical stance and emotional sensitivity, characteristics that allowed audiences to sympathize with his fate as the jungle expedition turned deadly. Gonzalez's performance was heartfelt and sincere, albeit restrained by the genre's limitations. His career after the film continued to grow, particularly in television, where he later starred in roles on The Good Doctor and Pretty Little Liars, indicating that Anacondas served as a bridge between his early television days and more prominent leading roles. Salli Richardson-Whitfield played Gail Stern, the corporate liaison accompanying the team. By 2004, Richardson-Whitfield was already a familiar face on screen with credits in films like Antoine Fisher and A Low-Down Dirty Shame, as well as numerous TV appearances. Her role in Anacondas, though secondary in narrative weight, demonstrated her professionalism and screen authority. She carried an air of confidence and calm in a setting of chaos, which gave her performance a grounded quality. Richardson-Whitfield continued her career in film and television post-Anacondas, notably in Eureka, where she played the lead female role. Though Anacondas was not a defining moment in her career, it fit into a broader portfolio of consistent work across multiple genres. Johnny Messner, cast as Bill Johnson, the expedition's rugged boat captain, was emerging as a typecast tough guy in Hollywood. Before this film, he had roles in TV series such as Guiding Light and had minor parts in movies like Tears of the Sun. In Anacondas, Messner played a character reminiscent of classic adventure film heroes, gruff, morally sound, and ultimately heroic. His chemistry with KaDee Strickland provided one of the few romantic subplots in the movie, though it remained understated. Messner's performance, while not groundbreaking, solidified his status as a dependable actor for action-heavy roles. Following the film, he continued working steadily in direct-to-video action and thriller films, often playing soldiers, cops, or mercenaries. Karl portrayed Tran, one of the local guides hired by the expedition. Yune, the younger brother of actor Yune, had limited screen credits at the time. His role in Anacondas was brief but memorable, highlighting his physicality and silent intensity. His performance did not receive much screen time, but it helped build a foundation for his future roles, including his part in Memoirs of a Geisha and later, Arrow, where he played Masao Yamashiro. While not a breakout role, Anacondas placed him on the radar for casting directors in action and fantasy genres. Overall, the cast of Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, was comprised of a mix of rising talents and journeyman actors, each of whom brought specific energy and presence to the ensemble. While the film did not catapult any of them into superstardom, it served as a transitional project, helping some actors bridge early career roles with future opportunities in television and genre cinema. Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, released in 2004, arrived at a time when creature features were making a minor resurgence in mainstream media. Although it was a standalone sequel to the 1997 film Anaconda, it aimed to forge its own identity with a new cast, fresh setting, and slightly shifted narrative focus. Unlike its predecessor, which leaned heavily into camp and star power, this sequel attempted to balance horror and adventure in a more grounded jungle survival format. While Anacondas didn't break cultural ground in the traditional sense of sparking major movements or influencing political discourse, it did contribute meaningfully to the tapestry of early 2000s genre filmmaking and helped to reinforce certain cinematic and societal patterns that were prominent during the era. From a pop cultural standpoint, the film continued a long lineage of man versus nature narratives that had been popular since the mid-20th century. It aligned with the growing public fascination with exotic locations, ancient secrets, and biological discoveries, a fascination fueled in part by the Discovery Channel, National Geographic specials, and the rise of ecotourism during the early 2000s. The idea of a mystical orchid hidden in a jungle that could prolong life played into popular tropes about the mystery and danger of the natural world. This trope, while not original, still carried cultural weight as it echoed Western colonial-era myths about untamed lands and the quest for immortality or power through nature. The jungle setting, filled with danger, betrayal, and survivalist tension, mirrored growing anxieties around environmental issues, globalization, and corporate greed. The expedition team is funded by a pharmaceutical company hoping to exploit the blood orchid for its potential life-extending properties, a theme that subtly critiques the commodification of nature and the moral dilemmas that arise from profit-driven science. Though not overtly political, these undercurrents of exploitation and ecological disrespect resonate with the ethical debates of the time. In the early 2000s, discussions about bioethics, deforestation, and the pharmaceutical industry were becoming more prevalent, and Anacondas taps into those anxieties through the narrative subtext. The film also echoed a broader trend in cinema during that period, the shift away from traditional monsters toward genetically enhanced or evolutionarily improbable creatures. The giant anacondas in this film are not merely natural predators. They are hyper-aggressive and possess near-supernatural endurance and strength, especially in the film's climax. This exaggerated depiction of nature reflects a cultural moment when fears of uncontrolled science, such as cloning or genetic engineering, were increasingly mainstream. Films like Jurassic Park had already paved the way, but Anacondas continued the tradition by emphasizing the unforeseen consequences of tampering with the unknown. In terms of its contribution to pop culture, the film did not generate the same level of meme culture or quotability as its predecessor, which featured an infamously campy performance by Jon Voight. However, it did retain a place in the collective memory of 2000s horror fans as part of the giant animal subgenre, which includes films like Lake Placid, Deep Blue Sea, and the later entries in the Sharknado franchise. It also found a second life in the home video and cable television markets, where it was frequently aired on late-night slots and creature feature marathons. Its accessibility in this format gave it a cult-like endurance, especially among viewers who appreciated the blend of adventure, horror, and B-movie charm. In the years following its release, Anacondas became a minor touchstone for those exploring the resurgence of natural horror films in the early 2000s. Scholars and genre critics occasionally referenced it when discussing the shift from slasher films of the 1990s to more survival-oriented horror scenarios that dominated the early 21st century. Unlike the nihilism of the torture porn subgenre or the spiritual terror of ghost stories, natural horror films like Anacondas suggested that the world itself, its animals, weather, and ecosystems, could become the antagonist. This thematic pivot subtly reflected a changing societal view, wherein climate change, emerging diseases, and environmental disasters were beginning to eclipse traditional horror villains in the public imagination. Though the film never achieved blockbuster status, it played a role in normalizing diverse casting in genre films. With a multicultural ensemble including African American, Latino, and Asian actors in prominent roles, it helped broaden the racial representation that had historically been limited in similar horror films. While not without flaws, the film's willingness to include a diverse cast who contributed meaningfully to the plot, not just as expendable characters, marked a small but notable progression in genre inclusivity. It also challenged the traditional hierarchy often seen in adventure horror narratives, where white, male protagonists were the default leaders and survivors. In digital culture, Anacondas occasionally resurfaced in discussion threads, YouTube retrospectives, and So But It's Good watch lists. Although it didn't become a meme factory, moments like the overly dramatic snake attacks and exaggerated character deaths contributed to its longevity as a fun, popcorn flick. These scenes, characterized by sudden bursts of gore or slow-motion reactions, often made their way into montage videos or horror compilations, giving the film an ironic second life online. Additionally, its practical effects, though dated, were appreciated in hindsight by fans nostalgic for pre-CGI monster movies. The setting of Borneo, albeit heavily fictionalized, also contributed to a wave of cinematic interest in Southeast Asia as a backdrop for mystery and danger. While the film itself was shot in locations such as Fiji and New Zealand, it played into exoticized portrayals of the rainforest that were typical in Western cinema. This continued a pattern of romanticizing and simultaneously fearing the non-Western world, a theme as old as the genre itself. The jungle, in this context, is both a paradise and a death trap, home to untapped natural beauty and uncontrollable, monstrous predators. Furthermore, the film's release during the post-9/11 era meant that its themes of trust, survival, and navigating hostile environments resonated with an audience that was increasingly wary of the unknown. Though the movie makes no direct reference to terrorism or geopolitical conflict, its narrative of a group of strangers forced to rely on each other in an unpredictable and deadly setting mirrored the broader cultural desire for unity, preparedness, and resilience in the face of crisis. Finally, Anacondas occupies a particular niche in the evolution of direct-to-video and television sequels. While it received a theatrical release, its modest box office success helped pave the way for future entries in the Anaconda franchise to move directly to video platforms. This transition from theatrical to home entertainment was emblematic of changing audience consumption habits, especially as DVDs and streaming platforms began to alter the landscape of film distribution. The production of Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, was an ambitious endeavor, one that tried to blend horror, action, and adventure within the context of a creature feature sequel. While the original Anaconda, 1997, had the novelty of a high-profile cast and a fresh concept, the sequel approached the story with a different tone, leaning more heavily into the survival horror and adventure genre with an ensemble of lesser-known but capable actors. This shift allowed the production team to explore new territory, both creatively and physically, as the film was shot in some of the most challenging environments for a Hollywood-style action film. One of the most notable aspects of the production was the decision to shoot on location in Fiji. This choice was made to capture the lush, untamed wilderness of the fictional Borneo jungle, where the story is set. Fiji offered the production team a breathtaking backdrop: dense rainforests, winding rivers, steep cliffs, and remote swamps that was both visually stunning and logistically punishing. Filming in such an environment introduced a slew of challenges, from unpredictable weather patterns to managing safety protocols for cast and crew in isolated terrain. Tropical storms often interrupted shooting schedules, and the high humidity posed issues for equipment and prosthetic effects, particularly animatronic and mechanical snake models that were sensitive to moisture and heat. The film was directed by Dwight H. Little, a veteran of genre filmmaking, known for his work on Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers, and rapid-paced television projects. Little brought a strong sense of timing and suspense to the film, understanding the mechanics of tension building within the framework of a horror action narrative. His approach was largely pragmatic, focusing on tight pacing, effective jump scares, and a sense of mounting dread. Rather than reinventing the creature feature, Little leaned into genre expectations: isolated characters, a hostile environment, and a nearly unstoppable monster, to craft a solid adventure with horror undertones. His directorial choices emphasized location, movement, and reaction rather than introspection or thematic complexity, keeping the film lean and forward-moving. Visually, one of the production's biggest undertakings was the depiction of the giant anacondas. The production team used a combination of practical effects and CGI to bring the snakes to life. The practical models, built by animatronic specialists, allowed for more grounded interactions between actors and creatures in close-quarters scenes. These models were designed with detailed skin textures and hydraulic mechanisms that allowed for head movement, jaw articulation, and slithering effects in limited ranges. However, for full-body shots, complex attacks, or movement sequences, CGI was employed. The use of CGI in 2004 was still evolving, and while it allowed for greater scale and dynamic action sequences, the visual quality did not always hold up under scrutiny. Nonetheless, the blending of techniques gave the film a more tangible feel than relying solely on digital effects. The snakes were portrayed as more aggressive and intelligent than in the previous film, driven by the mysterious properties of the blood orchid, a fictional flower that could extend life and enhance vitality. This plot device allowed the filmmakers to justify the increased aggression and coordination of the snakes, giving them a near-mythic quality. The production team leaned into this by designing sequences where the snakes hunted in packs, launched ambush attacks, and even appeared to exhibit protective behavior toward the flower. These narrative choices demanded a level of coordination between the visual effects team and the stunt crew, who had to choreograph intense action sequences involving water, pyrotechnics, and close-up creature confrontations. Stunt coordination played a major role in the film's physicality. Many of the scenes required the actors to perform in boats, in river currents, or while clinging to rocky cliffs and vines. Safety precautions were extensive, with divers and medics on standby for water sequences, as well as snake wranglers to manage any real reptiles used for close-up shots. The cast, despite their varying degrees of action experience, engaged in substantial physical training to prepare for the demands of the shoot. Johnny Messner, in particular, brought a rugged authenticity to the boat captain role, performing many of his own stunts and navigating river scenes with practical skill that contributed to the film's immersive feel. One behind-the-scenes anecdote involved a mechanical snake malfunctioning during a climactic fight scene. The animatronic creature was supposed to lunge at the character played by Marsden, but the hydraulic system froze due to a sudden downpour, causing the snake to collapse mid-shot. Rather than scrap the scene, the production team reworked the choreography to incorporate practical effects and cutaways, using quick editing to simulate the attack. This kind of on-the-fly problem-solving characterized much of the shoot, where technical difficulties had to be worked around creatively to maintain the production schedule. Another production challenge was sound. Jungle environments are filled with unpredictable ambient noise, bird calls, insect hums, running water, all of which complicated live sound recording. Much of the dialogue had to be re-recorded in post-production through ADR, automated dialogue replacement. This, in turn, meant that performances had to be reinterpreted in sound booths, which presented its own challenges in maintaining emotional continuity with the physical performances on set. Sound engineers also layered in a complex audio environment to match the setting, intensifying the feeling of being deep in the wilderness and always under threat. Cost control was another factor shaping the production. With a smaller budget than the original film, the crew had to economize wherever possible. This led to the use of tight shooting schedules, condensed sets, and strategic use of visual effects. Interior shots, such as scenes inside the expedition's boat or temporary camps, were constructed in controlled environments to allow for flexible lighting and camera work. Only essential large-scale shots were filmed in open jungle, saving resources while still achieving visual authenticity. Producer Hudson Hickman, known for his work in television, helped streamline the production process by applying tight pre-production planning and logistical coordination. The script underwent several rewrites before shooting, with changes aimed at enhancing the pace and amplifying the horror elements without inflating the budget. At one point, the ending was altered during post-production based on test screening feedback, which suggested audiences wanted a more conclusive and dramatic resolution. As a result, the final snake confrontation and the explosive finale involving the waterfall were adjusted to offer a bigger payoff. Despite the many hurdles faced, the production team of Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid maintained a strong spirit of collaboration. Crew members frequently cited the beauty of the location and the camaraderie among cast and crew as highlights of the experience. Working in such a raw and unpredictable environment demanded a high degree of professionalism and adaptability from everyone involved. Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid follows a classic adventure horror narrative structure with an ensemble cast thrust into a deadly environment under the pretense of scientific exploration. The story is linear and unfolds in a progressive escalation of danger, blending elements of survival thriller, creature feature, and jungle expedition genres. While the plot adheres to several well-worn tropes, it also manages to inject moments of tension, unpredictability, and mild philosophical questioning, mostly centered on human greed and the ethical boundaries of scientific advancement. The film begins with a prologue introducing the central premise. A rare flower known as the Blood Orchid has been discovered deep in the jungles of Borneo. This flower is said to possess compounds capable of prolonging human life, essentially acting as a biological fountain of youth. This simple, yet high-concept idea sets the stage for the narrative's motivation. A pharmaceutical company, KaDee Industries, dispatches a team of researchers, scientists, and corporate representatives to locate and harvest the flower, under the leadership of the driven Dr. Jack Byron. The plot is set into motion when Byron assembles a crew that includes herpetologist Samantha Rogers, financial overseer Gordon Mitchell, and a small team of specialists and assistants. They travel to the Indonesian island of Borneo, where they hire Bill Johnson, a rugged and skeptical boat captain, to guide them up a river system into the interior jungle. Almost immediately, narrative tension is introduced via the dangerous seasonal weather window, which forces the group to embark hastily, underprepared for the perils ahead. This ticking clock element, known as a narrative time constraint, serves to accelerate the action and justify many of the reckless decisions made by characters throughout the film. The narrative structure quickly transitions from scientific mission to survival horror after a series of obstacles derail the team's plans. The first major plot turning point occurs when their boat crashes after a confrontation with territorial locals and a raging waterfall. This isolates the group deep in the jungle, away from any support. From here, the real antagonist of the story emerges, not merely the hostile environment, but the monstrous anacondas, genetically oversized snakes that have evolved to be both territorial and unnaturally aggressive. The snakes, drawn to the blooming of the blood orchid, are presented as apex predators with almost supernatural capabilities. As the group ventures deeper, it becomes clear that the snakes are more than just animals. They are thematic representations of nature's response to human intrusion. The pacing of the film builds from this point, moving from occasional attacks to full-scale predator-prey sequences that eliminate members of the group one by one. This whittling down of the cast is a familiar structure in horror adventure films, heightening suspense by forcing characters into morally compromising situations while increasing the body count. What adds complexity to the narrative is the gradual reveal of each character's motivation and how they respond under pressure. Jack Byron's willingness to manipulate, sacrifice, or lie to achieve the mission's goal transforms him from a mere anti-hero into the film's true human antagonist. This role reversal is a key structural element. The audience begins to root less for the mission and more for the survival of the team, particularly Samantha and Bill, whose integrity remains largely intact. This shift reorients the plot from exploration to escape, giving the second half of the film a much darker and more survivalist tone. The climax of the film is set in a forgotten tribal village surrounded by orchids, now revealed to be the breeding ground for the snakes. In a pivotal sequence, the group uncovers the interconnection between the flowers and the snake's unnatural longevity, implying that the blood orchid not only prolongs human life, but enhances the reptile's growth and aggression. This moment, while brief, serves as the film's intellectual apex, combining the horror element with a pseudoscientific rationale. The final confrontation with the largest anaconda is choreographed as a mix of physical action and psychological resolution. Jack Byron meets a fitting end, hoisted by his own hubris, as the snake he sought to outmaneuver ultimately devours him. This serves as a moralistic resolution in traditional adventure horror storytelling. The survivors, now reduced to a few, must escape the jungle and abandon the mission. The last scenes mirror the beginning of the film in setting, a journey on the river, but the context has drastically shifted. Where once there was ambition, now there is reflection and relief. Throughout its runtime, the film maintains a steady pace, but intentionally accelerates as the stakes increase. The story is broken into three primary acts. Act 1. Establishment of the expedition, characters, and mission goals. This includes setting the stakes with a blood orchid and introducing minor foreshadowing of danger. Act 2. The journey into the jungle, breakdown of plans, first snake encounters, internal conflict among team members, and several deaths. The midpoint features the discovery of the orchid's link to the snakes. Act 3. Full descent into survival horror, major character deaths, final confrontation, and escape. This act is punctuated by a combination of action sequences and emotional closure. The film structure does not innovate heavily, instead choosing to rely on the effectiveness of established horror and adventure formulas. However, the integration of a high-stakes pharmaceutical subplot with monster movie elements allows it to carve a small niche in the genre. Unlike its predecessor, which emphasized a more straightforward creature-hunting humans narrative, Anacondas incorporates a thematic layer surrounding the pursuit of eternal youth and the ethical cost of scientific ambition. This gives the film a narrative backbone that helps support its more sensational aspects. Flashbacks are minimal, and the narrative is told in real time, which heightens the immediacy of danger. Dialogue-driven exposition is used sparingly, with characters often revealing backstory or scientific details through conversations that feel organic, if sometimes overly simplistic. The use of suspenseful moments, such as characters wading through water unaware of the predator nearby, builds tension without relying heavily on gore or graphic violence, favoring the psychological unease of being hunted. While some viewers may find the character decisions frustratingly illogical at times, a common trait in horror narratives, this serves to maintain audience engagement. The film relies on the anticipation of death rather than the spectacle of it, a narrative choice that creates a more suspenseful experience even when plot points become predictable. Though Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid is primarily a creature feature survival thriller, the film weaves in a number of deeper themes and symbolic undertones that elevate it beyond simple monster movie fare. These thematic threads are not always overtly stated, but they underpin much of the narrative, character dynamics, and visual storytelling. In exploring nature versus exploitation, the hubris of science, mortality, greed, and survivalism, the film reflects broader anxieties of its time while also nodding to enduring genre tropes. One of the central themes is the conflict between human ambition and the natural world. This is epitomized by the central plot device, the rare and elusive blood orchid, which blooms only once every 7 years and is believed to hold the secret to extended human life. The expedition to locate this flower is spearheaded by a pharmaceutical company with motives rooted not in discovery but in profit. The idea that eternal youth can be harvested, bottled, and commodified becomes a metaphor for humanity's relentless attempt to dominate and exploit nature for its own ends. This parallels real-world issues surrounding deforestation, biopiracy, and the unethical extraction of natural resources from developing countries. The jungle, lush and untamed, acts as a physical manifestation of nature's resistance to being subdued, often reclaiming those who try to bend it to their will. Closely tied to this is the theme of greed and its consequences. Several characters, particularly Jack Byron, are driven by self-interest masked as scientific inquiry. Byron's character arc is defined by his willingness to sacrifice the safety and lives of others for the promise of fame and fortune. His descent into ruthless behavior, abandoning colleagues, endangering lives, and manipulating the group, illustrates the corrupting influence of greed. The jungle and its serpents become enforcers of a kind of poetic justice, punishing those who act out of selfishness and reward those who exhibit selflessness, cooperation, and respect for the environment. The snakes themselves serve as potent symbols. As in many mythologies and religious traditions, serpents and anacondas represent both danger and knowledge. The blood orchid, guarded in part by the anaconda's unnatural behavior, can be seen as forbidden fruit, offering great reward, but only at tremendous risk. The fact that the snakes in this film live longer, grow larger, and reproduce more aggressively due to their consumption of the orchid enhances the symbolism. They become a kind of monstrous byproduct of human tampering, nature mutated by greed. The mutation is not caused directly by people, but the link is clear. The orchid's potential to extend life has already been realized by nature itself in a terrifying form. It implies that what humans covet, nature has already harnessed, just in a way that is beyond our control. Another recurring theme is survival and the instincts that come with it. While horror and adventure films often rely on this premise, Anacondas pushes it further by examining who survives and why. Characters who collaborate, respect the natural order, and value life tend to fare better than those driven by ambition or hubris. Samantha Rogers, for example, represents scientific curiosity grounded in ethics. Her focus on the implications of the orchid's power rather than its monetary value positions her as a foil to Byron. Her survival is not only a matter of luck, but is thematically tied to her approach to both science and morality. In contrast, characters like Gail Stern and Ben Douglas, despite their generally good intentions, become victims largely because of the group's collective involvement in a morally dubious mission. The film suggests that even passive participation in an unethical cause can have dire consequences. Mortality and the fear of death also form an undercurrent throughout the film. The very motivation for finding the blood orchid is rooted in the desire to conquer aging, a fundamental fear of human beings. The jungle, however, presents constant reminders of life's fragility. Characters are killed swiftly, often unexpectedly, reinforcing the idea that death is an inescapable part of the natural order. The orchid may offer the illusion of immortality, but the jungle and the anacondas serve as a reminder that there is always a price to be paid for seeking to cheat death. The flower's once-in-7 years bloom cycle also metaphorically echoes human lifespans, brief, precious, and fleeting. The allure of extending that life becomes a moral dilemma, especially when such power comes at the cost of others' lives or through ecological disruption. There are also subtler themes at play, such as colonialism and intrusion of the Western world into untamed spaces. The presence of American scientists in the Borneo jungle mirrors historic patterns of Western explorers and corporations venturing into foreign lands under the guise of science or progress, only to exploit local resources. Though the film does not explicitly explore the impact on local communities, the absence of local voices or indigenous perspectives is telling. The jungle is presented as a backdrop for Western ambitions and fear, emphasizing the often one-sided narratives in similar adventure films. The guides, like Tran, are given minimal agency, reinforcing a long-standing trope of local characters being used for support and sacrifice without being fully fleshed out. The film indirectly critiques this by showing the failure of the Western-led mission. Nature, indifferent and brutal, ultimately reclaims the intruders. Another layer worth noting is the gender dynamic and the role of women in survival situations. Samantha, as the primary female protagonist, is not sexualized or portrayed as a damsel in distress. Instead, she is intelligent, confident, and often assumes leadership when male authority figures falter. Her character subverts expectations and subtly challenges the male-dominated narratives typical of action horror films. In contrast, Gail Stern's role as the corporate figure places her in a more traditional mold, representing institutional greed, but she too shows moments of vulnerability and introspection. The contrast between these two women offers a spectrum of female representation that, while still constrained by genre norms, shows signs of evolving character agency. Visually, the film employs symbolism through its use of light and dark. Scenes that take place during storms, at dusk, or in dimly lit areas often coincide with moments of revelation or betrayal. The jungle itself is a visual metaphor, dense, mysterious, and impenetrable, symbolizing the unknown forces of nature and the subconscious fears of humanity. The recurring imagery of vines, water, and decay reinforce the idea of life being both beautiful and perilous, a duality that defines much of the film's mood. In the context of genre, the film also draws from classic mythological structures, such as the hero's journey. Characters are metaphorically descending into the underworld, a dark place filled with trials, monsters, and moral tests. Those who emerge from this underworld are transformed, carrying knowledge or trauma with them. The jungle acts as this mythic realm, and the Anacondas as its gatekeepers. Survival is not merely physical but moral and psychological. The journey into the jungle becomes a confrontation with both external threats and internal conflicts, and only those willing to confront their fears and values survive intact. Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid, while often categorized within the creature feature and B-movie tradition, carried a distinctive visual aesthetic that leaned into the atmospheric and environmental tension of the jungle setting. Though not a high-budget blockbuster, the film demonstrated a deliberate effort to craft an immersive visual world. Through its cinematography, lighting, framing, and overall design, the film successfully established a dense, dangerous, and exotic atmosphere that complemented the suspense-driven narrative. At its core, the visual approach of Anacondas was shaped by the jungle itself, with the cinematography functioning not only as a method of documentation but as an extension of the film's primal themes. The cinematographer Stephen F. Winden, who would later gain recognition for his work on the Fast and Furious franchise, brought a practical and grounded approach to the visual storytelling. His focus on environmental texture, the play of light through dense foliage, reflections on muddy river water, the glisten of sweat on characters' skin, created a tangible, almost tactile sensation that brought the jungle to life. The camera rarely felt static or disconnected. Instead, it often moved with the characters, employing steady tracking shots or handheld movements that simulated the claustrophobic sensation of being trapped in an uncontrollable wilderness. Winden's use of organic camera work gave the film a visceral, documentary-like edge that amplified the sense of dread. One of the most noticeable visual strategies was the film's use of natural and low lighting. The scenes within the jungle were frequently dim, diffused by the thick canopy overhead. Shadows played a critical role in building tension, as visibility was often obscured, keeping both the characters and the audience in a state of uncertainty. The interplay of shadow and light was carefully balanced, enough to disorient, but not so dark that it hindered the viewing experience. This careful calibration of visibility aligned with the film's horror roots, where the unseen and the partially glimpsed are often more terrifying than overt imagery. In contrast to the subdued tones of the jungle interiors, the Blood Orchid itself, when finally revealed, was presented with a sudden burst of color and light. The orchid's vibrant red and purple hues stood out dramatically against the muted greens and browns of the forest, serving both a narrative and aesthetic function. Visually, this created a striking contrast that elevated the climax of the film, signaling the elusive treasure that had driven the entire expedition. The use of saturation in this moment highlighted the mythical quality of the orchid, making it appear almost otherworldly, an alluring but dangerous prize in the heart of darkness. Framing choices in the film consistently emphasized isolation, vulnerability, and entrapment. Characters were often framed within narrow pathways, surrounded by towering trees or looming cliffs. These vertical compositions enhanced the feeling of being overwhelmed by nature. Close-ups were used sparingly but effectively, often during moments of terror or decision-making, to emphasize emotional reactions. Wide shots captured the enormity of the landscape, reinforcing the theme that the jungle was a living, breathing antagonist in its own right. The spatial geography was used not just to show where characters were, but to show how small they were in the face of the wild. The film made strong use of water-based cinematography, with many scenes taking place on rivers, streams, or in rainy conditions. Water became a visual motif, symbolizing both movement and entrapment. The boat, often shown from wide angles drifting through the murky water, became a metaphor for the expedition's fragile control over their journey. Reflections in the water were used to foreshadow danger, such as subtle ripples or the vague silhouette of an approaching snake. Underwater shots were also used, albeit sparingly, to show both the beauty and the menace of the environment from a different perspective. These sequences, while not groundbreaking in execution, enhanced the thematic resonance of survival in an untamed, unpredictable setting. Color grading played a crucial role in establishing the tone. The overall palette leaned toward earthy tones, deep greens, browns, and grays, which lent the film a grounded, naturalistic look. Even in moments of action or violence, the color scheme rarely broke into excessive stylization. Instead, it retained a somber realism, contributing to the creeping horror rather than the explosive kind seen in other creature features. When more vivid colors did appear, such as blood, flowers, or fire, they felt disruptive, emphasizing the unnatural events occurring within the otherwise neutral landscape. The visual effects, particularly the portrayal of the snakes, were a mixed element in the cinematography. Due to technological limitations and budget constraints, the snakes were created through a combination of CGI and animatronics. The integration of these creatures into the visual landscape was not always seamless, and this occasionally disrupted the film's visual cohesion. However, the cinematography attempted to mitigate this through quick cuts, shadow-heavy framing, and partially obscured reveals. By rarely giving the audience prolonged or overly clear shots of the snakes, the film created a sense of suspense that partially masked the limitations of the visual effects. This less is more approach, though sometimes dictated by necessity, actually worked in favor of the horror tone. An interesting choice in the film's visual style was its treatment of movement. Whether it was the swinging vines, the swaying trees, or the slithering of the snakes, motion was a constant feature of the frame. Even in seemingly static shots, there was rarely complete stillness. This constant background movement contributed to a heightened sense of unease. Anything could happen at any moment, and danger often came from the periphery. This visual restlessness mirrored the characters' psychological states, never fully safe, never at rest. The use of aerial shots was another component that reinforced the scope and danger of the jungle. These shots were typically employed at transitional moments, when the team entered new territory or after a member of the group had died. These wide, bird's-eye views were a reminder of how isolated the group truly was and how vast the terrain remained. It created a visual rhythm, alternating between the intimate tension of close quarters and the expansive dread of the unknown. Cinematically, Anacondas also employed a number of visual homages to earlier jungle and survival films. Sequences involving the movement through dense terrain, characters caught in torrential rain, or eerie moments of silence in a beautiful but ominous setting were reminiscent of classic adventure or war films set in the tropics. While these techniques were not reinvented for Anacondas, their familiarity worked in the film's favor by grounding the audience in a recognizable cinematic tradition. This gave the movie an archetypal visual structure, even if it was wrapped in a modern creature feature package. Sound is a crucial element in any horror or adventure film, and in Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, the soundtrack and sound design play a central role in creating atmosphere, building suspense, and amplifying the emotional and visceral impact of each scene. While the movie may not be widely recognized for a groundbreaking musical score, it utilizes audio elements effectively to complement its jungle setting, intense action sequences, and creature-driven horror. The score for the film was composed by Nerita Tyson-Chu, an Australian composer known for her work on film and television. Tyson-Chu's musical approach for Anacondas leans heavily into atmospheric tension, with a focus on percussive rhythms, low string drones, and sudden bursts of brass or synthesized stings that punctuate moments of danger or surprise. The soundtrack avoids melodic or thematic motifs commonly found in blockbuster films, opting instead for an ambient soundscape that mirrors the unpredictable and menacing nature of the jungle environment. One of the key strengths of the film's music is its ability to remain largely invisible while heightening the audience's emotional response. The score rarely draws attention to itself. Instead, it subtly layers anxiety under the dialogue and visual action. For instance, during scenes where the characters are navigating the dense and treacherous terrain of Borneo, the score uses soft, pulsing rhythms that evoke a sense of unease and vulnerability. The lack of clear musical cues or resolution in these moments mirrors the characters' lack of control and knowledge of their environment. In the more suspenseful or action-heavy scenes, such as the surprise attack of the first giant anaconda or the final showdown in the cave, Tyson-Chu's score becomes more pronounced, using dissonant chords, rapid tempo increases, and pounding percussion to escalate tension. These musical shifts are strategically timed to coincide with visual cues, like a snake's sudden appearance or a character's scream, which helps to unify the film's pacing and emotional tone. Equally important as the musical score is the film's sound design, which arguably does more of the heavy lifting in establishing the immersive world of Anacondas. The soundscape of the Borneo jungle is brought to life with layered audio of rustling leaves, insect chirps, bird calls, distant thunder, and the ambient hum of unseen wildlife. These environmental sounds are continuous and dynamic, changing subtly based on location, time of day, or narrative tension. For example, when the characters first enter the deeper jungle, the sound mix shifts, crickets give way to louder, more menacing noises, and the rustling becomes more aggressive, suggesting hidden threats just out of frame. One of the most notable aspects of the sound design is the way it represents the snakes themselves. The giant anacondas are given an almost mythic presence through sound. Since the visual effects of the creatures were limited by early 2000s CGI technology, the film relied heavily on sound to suggest their movements and presence. Before an anaconda strikes, there is often a sequence of audio cues, a low-frequency rumble, a hiss that feels unnaturally close, a heavy slither through wet undergrowth, and the snapping of twigs or splashing of water. These layered effects serve both to alert the audience and to generate a sensory unease. The anticipation created by these sounds often works more effectively than the creature's visual reveal. In some sequences, the anacondas are made to sound massive simply through their impact on the environment. For example, when a snake coils around a tree or boat, the sound mix emphasizes creaking wood, snapping branches, and rushing wind, giving the impression of a force of nature rather than a simple predator. These choices elevate the creature's menace, turning what might have been a standard monster into something more primal and terrifying. The film also uses sound to differentiate between the emotional beats of its human characters. Dialogue is crisp and clear, even in open jungle scenes, allowing viewers to stay connected with character interactions. However, subtle sound cues are used to emphasize changes in mood, echoes in cave scenes, slight audio distortion during panic attacks, or a rising sound floor in moments of fear. These choices create a more intimate emotional resonance, especially when characters are separated or in danger. Moments of silence are also skillfully used throughout the film. In horror cinema, silence can be just as important as sound. Several scenes, particularly those that involve stalking or waiting for danger to strike, cut out ambient noise entirely, leaving the audience with only the sound of a character's breathing or heartbeat. These audio choices draw viewers in and create a shared sense of dread. The absence of sound in key moments makes the eventual jump scare or explosion of violence even more jarring and effective. The film's climactic scenes benefit from a full orchestral and environmental blend. In the underground cavern where the final confrontation takes place, the sound design builds on echoes, dripping water, the screech of bats, and the reverberating hiss of an approaching snake. The music rises and falls with each character's action, mirroring the struggle and the stakes. The final moments of the film, which combine music, environmental noise, and creature sound effects, form a crescendo that delivers emotional payoff despite the narrative's simplicity. Beyond the score and sound effects, Anacondas also makes use of selective diegetic music. There are moments early in the film when the characters are traveling on the boat, and a more lighthearted, rhythmic background music is used, signaling temporary safety or camaraderie. These moments are short-lived but serve as emotional markers, contrasting with the more somber and terrifying audio cues later in the narrative. In terms of technical achievement, the film's sound editing and mixing are competent and, at times, quite immersive. While not award-winning, the audio elements are an essential component of the film's suspense and atmosphere. For a mid-budget creature feature, Anacondas demonstrates a clear understanding of how sound can compensate for limited visual effects, enhancing the tension, realism, and emotional engagement of its jungle horror setting. Overall, the soundtrack and sound design of Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid exemplify a functional and occasionally inventive approach to horror audio. The music serves to underscore tension without overpowering scenes, while the sound design creates a tangible sense of place and danger. Through strategic use of environmental sounds, creature effects, and musical cues, the film sustains an atmosphere of constant threat and wonder, which is crucial for a film set deep in the unpredictable wilds of the jungle. Though it may not be remembered as an iconic soundtrack in cinematic history, the film's audio landscape remains an unsung hero of its storytelling, helping to elevate the experience for viewers through subtle and well-crafted sound choices. When Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid debuted in theaters on August 27, 2004, it arrived with a modest marketing push and the name recognition of its 1997 predecessor, Anaconda. As a standalone sequel, it did not continue the exact story of the original but retained the core concept of humans facing off against enormous, intelligent snakes in a hostile jungle environment. Despite the built-in fanbase and the popularity of creature features at the time, the film received mixed to negative reviews from critics, although audience reactions were somewhat more forgiving, particularly among fans of the genre. Critically, the film struggled to find favor with mainstream reviewers. Professional film critics often criticized it for being formulaic, derivative, and lacking the campy charm that had made the original a cult favorite. One recurring criticism was that the film failed to elevate itself beyond the cliches of monster movie tropes. The dialogue was often labeled as generic, the characters as thinly developed, and the suspense as predictable. However, some reviewers acknowledged that the film did deliver a few effective jump scares and moments of tension, which are staples of the genre. They also noted improvements in visual effects compared to the first film, particularly in the snake animation, even if those effects did not reach the level of cutting-edge CGI by 2004 standards. Audience reception told a slightly different story. The film performed moderately well at the box office, grossing approximately $71 million worldwide against a production budget estimated at $20 to $25 million. This made it financially successful, if not a blockbuster. Viewers who went into the film with the expectation of a popcorn monster movie found enough action, suspense, and exotic scenery to be entertained. Genre enthusiasts were more forgiving of the film's flaws, seeing it as a competent entry in the eco-horror subgenre that delivered the essentials: jungle peril, over-the-top creatures, and a high body count. For audiences with lowered expectations or affection for B-movie aesthetics, Anacondas delivered a solid, if not remarkable, experience. Within the horror and creature feature communities, the movie received a more nuanced response. While purists often pointed out its lack of innovation or depth, others appreciated the film's attempt to explore new thematic territory through the fictional concept of the Blood Orchid, a flower said to hold the secret to longevity. This plot device gave the film a pseudo-scientific edge that differentiated it slightly from its predecessor, which was more of a straightforward survival horror film. The ethical dilemmas presented in the story, particularly the tension between corporate greed and human life, were acknowledged, even if they weren't explored in great depth. As a result, the film gained a niche following among fans of jungle adventure horror and late-night cable TV fare. The performances also drew divided reactions. While most critics found the acting serviceable at best, there was praise for certain cast members, especially KaDee Strickland and Chestnut, who brought sincerity and charisma to their roles. Critics noted that while the script limited character development, some of the actors managed to infuse their roles with personality. Conversely, Marsden's portrayal of the antagonist Byron was often cited as one-note or exaggerated, though this was also seen as appropriate for a genre film requiring a clear villain archetype. Another point of contention was the film's tone. While the original Anaconda embraced its campy, almost self-aware identity, thanks in large part to over-the-top performances like Jon Voight's infamous Tran, the sequel opted for a slightly more serious approach. This shift in tone alienated some fans of the original who were hoping for another schlock-filled creature romp. The absence of a flamboyant villain or outrageous character moments made Anacondas feel more conventional, which disappointed viewers expecting the same level of theatricality. In terms of accolades, Anacondas did not receive any major awards or nominations, which is not unusual for a film of its type. However, it did earn some recognition within fan-based and genre-specific platforms. It was frequently included in discussions and lists focused on creature features of the 2000s and was often mentioned in retrospectives on jungle survival horror films. The film's success at the box office despite lukewarm critical reviews highlighted its appeal to a specific demographic, which favored spectacle and suspense over narrative complexity or artistic merit. Controversy was largely absent from the film's release, but there were a few criticisms about the depiction of Southeast Asia and the fictionalization of Borneo. While the film made use of the setting for its mysterious and exotic atmosphere, some observers noted the vague or inaccurate portrayal of local cultures and geography. The presence of local guides in the narrative was seen as a missed opportunity to provide more authentic representation, as these characters were often reduced to expendable roles in service of the plot. However, these criticisms were generally not part of a wider cultural backlash, and the film avoided major public relations issues. Over the years, Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid, has maintained a quiet presence in popular culture, largely due to its accessibility on streaming platforms, cable reruns, and DVD collections. It has found a secondary life as a late-night movie that appeals to viewers seeking nostalgic, creature-driven entertainment. As horror fans have revisited older genre films from the 2000s, Anacondas has occasionally been reassessed with more generous interpretations, often with the understanding that its intentions were modest and its ambitions grounded in pulp storytelling. In conclusion, the reception of Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid, was mixed, skewing negative among critics but more forgiving among audiences who appreciated it for what it was: a survival horror adventure with jungle settings and giant snakes. It did not revolutionize the genre or offer groundbreaking storytelling, but it provided a solid entry point for casual viewers and young horror fans. Its financial success demonstrated the enduring appeal of creature features, even when critical reception falls short. The film exists today not as a cult classic but as a reliable, if unremarkable, entry in the early 2000s monster movie canon. Anacondas. The hunt for the blood orchid occupies a unique place in early 2000s genre cinema, functioning as both a continuation of the creature feature tradition and an example of mid-budget horror-adventure films that straddled the line between mainstream appeal and niche cult followings. Though it did not achieve blockbuster status or widespread critical acclaim, its legacy is multifaceted, influencing future filmmakers, spawning sequels, and contributing to the broader popularity of jungle-based monster thrillers. The most immediate legacy of Anacondas is its role as the direct sequel to the 1997 Anaconda film, expanding the franchise's mythology through the introduction of the elusive blood orchid, a rare plant with supposed life-extending properties. This narrative element gave the film a pseudoscientific edge and injected fresh stakes beyond mere survival against giant snakes. The blood orchid concept broadened the thematic possibilities of the series, setting the stage for subsequent sequels that further explored exotic flora and fauna as plot drivers. By blending horror with adventure and a touch of sci-fi, Anacondas carved out a space for creature features that incorporated environmental and scientific curiosities, a trend that would later echo in other monster films and franchises. Following Anacondas, the franchise continued with Anaconda 3, Offspring, 2008, and Anacondas, Trail of Blood Orchid, 2009, both made-for-television sequels that leaned heavily into the creature horror genre's camp appeal. These sequels capitalized on the mythology introduced in the 2004 film, though with smaller budgets and more direct-to-video sensibilities. While these follow-ups did not achieve critical or commercial success, they cemented the franchise as a reliable staple in the realm of genre-specific entertainment. The Anaconda series, particularly after the 2004 sequel, became synonymous with a certain type of creature feature formula: jungle expeditions, scientific quests gone wrong, and encounters with deadly, oversized animals. Beyond its franchise, Anacondas, the hunt for the blood orchid contributed to the early 2000s revival of jungle-set monster movies. This niche, which includes films featuring giant spiders, crocodiles, and snakes, experienced a wave of interest partly because of advances in CGI and special effects, making such creatures more believable on screen. Though Anacondas employed a mix of practical effects and CGI, its visual impact helped inspire other filmmakers to attempt similar creature-focused stories in exotic locations. The film's depiction of a perilous jungle expedition has been echoed in various low-to-mid-budget horror films, documentaries with fictionalized elements, and even video game design, where jungle environments populated by monstrous animals became common. The film also left a subtle cultural imprint through its embrace of the nature strikes back trope. This theme, which had been a staple since earlier monster movies like Jaws and King Kong, resonated with growing environmental awareness during the early 21st century. While Anacondas did not explicitly engage in environmental activism, its story about humans intruding into delicate ecosystems and paying the price contributed to a larger cinematic conversation about the relationship between humanity and nature. This subtext has been picked up and expanded upon in subsequent films and TV shows that depict nature's retaliation as a form of cautionary tale. In popular culture, Anacondas, the hunt for the blood orchid has inspired a modest degree of recognition, mostly within fan communities dedicated to creature horror and B-movie genres. It has been referenced in online discussions, podcasts, and fan-made content celebrating the campy thrills of jungle monster films. Memes referencing the over-the-top nature of giant snakes attacking humans have circulated periodically on social media platforms, keeping the film alive as a cultural touchstone for lovers of cheesy yet entertaining horror. The film's legacy is also tied to its cast, many of whom went on to establish successful careers in television and film. While Anacondas itself did not make stars out of its lead actors, it helped introduce them to audiences who would follow their work in other genre projects. This pipeline of actors moving between creature features and TV dramas exemplifies the symbiotic relationship between genre cinema and mainstream entertainment. From a merchandising perspective, Anacondas did not generate a significant commercial spin-off empire, but it contributed to the ongoing popularity of creature feature collectibles, such as action figures, posters, and DVD extras. The visual iconography of the blood orchid and massive snakes has occasionally appeared in horror conventions and niche fan events. Though modest, these touches have helped sustain interest in the film years after its release. Finally, the influence of Anacondas can be traced in how it demonstrated the viability of mid-tier horror adventure movies that combined practical effects with emerging CGI technology. Its balance of suspense, action, and creature horror provided a template for subsequent filmmakers aiming to craft thrilling, monster-driven narratives without the financial backing of major studios. In this way, Anacondas helped pave the way for a generation of horror filmmakers and producers who sought to blend genre conventions with more grounded scientific or adventure storytelling. In summary, the legacy and influence of Anacondas, the hunt for the blood orchid, lie not in blockbuster success or critical praise, but in its role as a genre touchstone, franchise builder, and creative springboard. It nurtured a mythology that extended the Anaconda universe, inspired similar creature feature projects, and sustained the cultural fascination with jungle-based monster stories. Its echoes are felt in the ongoing popularity of creature horror, jungle adventure tales, and the enduring allure of nature's deadliest predators on screen. Upon its release in 2004, Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid was met with a variety of reactions from audiences, ranging from enthusiastic enjoyment to critical dismissal. The film occupied a particular niche, viewed as a mid-tier creature feature blending action, horror, and adventure, that appealed especially to fans of the genre and viewers looking for a thrilling, escapist experience. The responses to the movie reflect the tastes and cultural context of the early 2000s, a period marked by both an interest in blockbuster spectacles and a growing appreciation for niche, B-movie entertainment. For many viewers, the film's central draw was its premise, a dangerous expedition into the jungles of Borneo in search of a mysterious plant with life-extending properties, while being hunted by giant, deadly anacondas. This combination of adventure and horror tapped into a long-standing fascination with the unknown and the exotic, evoking the spirit of earlier jungle adventure films and monster movies. Audiences generally enjoyed the tension created by the natural dangers of the jungle combined with the supernatural threat posed by the oversized snakes, which served as a fresh twist on survival horror. Audience members appreciated the film's suspenseful moments and action sequences, often citing the palpable sense of claustrophobia and the unpredictability of the jungle environment. The practical and CGI effects used to portray the anacondas, while not cutting-edge by today's standards, were effective enough to maintain engagement and deliver scares, especially in a theater setting. The movie's pacing kept viewers on edge, with sudden attacks and twists that injected adrenaline into the narrative. For many fans of creature horror, this was precisely what made the film entertaining and worth revisiting. However, viewers' interpretations of the characters and story varied widely. Some found the characters' archetypal qualities, such as the cold, ambitious leader, the determined scientist, and the loyal guide, predictable yet comforting, fulfilling familiar genre expectations. Others criticized the character development as superficial, feeling that the film sacrificed depth for spectacle. Nevertheless, many audiences enjoyed the interplay among the cast, particularly the moments of humor and human drama that provided relief from the relentless threat of the snakes. One notable aspect of audience reflection concerned the film's environmental subtext. While not overtly preachy, the story hinted at humanity's arrogance in invading natural habitats and exploiting nature for profit. This theme resonated with viewers increasingly aware of environmental issues such as deforestation, species extinction, and corporate exploitation of natural resources. Some audiences interpreted the snake's deadly attacks as a metaphor for nature's revenge against human interference, lending the film a layer of meaning beyond simple thrills. Generational responses to Anacondas also reveal interesting patterns. Younger viewers in the early 2000s, growing up in the era of CGI-heavy blockbusters, tended to approach the film with a sense of fun and camp appreciation, often enjoying it as a guilty pleasure or cult favorite. The movie's sometimes exaggerated performances and action sequences became points of affectionate humor among fans. For more mature audiences, the film's reliance on genre tropes and occasional narrative contrivances were met with some frustration, though many acknowledged its effectiveness as a popcorn thriller. Over time, the film developed a modest cult following, particularly within online communities devoted to creature features and so bad it's good cinema. Fans often celebrate Anacondas for its combination of jungle adventure and monster horror, viewing it as a quintessential early 2000s genre film that captures the era's cinematic sensibilities. The movie's presence on streaming platforms and DVD allowed it to reach new audiences beyond its initial theatrical run, enabling reinterpretations and rediscoveries. In retrospect, many viewers appreciate the film for its atmosphere and commitment to the creature feature formula. The film's relatively straightforward narrative and clear stakes make it accessible to a wide audience, while its jungle setting provides a visually intriguing backdrop that enhances the sense of danger and mystery. The ensemble cast's performances, though sometimes constrained by the script, contribute to the film's appeal, offering moments of sincerity amid the thrills. Audience interpretations often extend to the film's treatment of gender and teamwork. The strong presence of a female herpetologist as a central character was somewhat progressive for the genre at the time, reflecting changing attitudes toward women in adventure and action roles. Samantha Rogers' resilience and expertise provided a positive role model for viewers, and her leadership within the group was generally well received. This aspect allowed some audiences to connect with the film beyond its monster horror elements. On the flip side, some viewers noted that certain tropes, such as the expendable characters who fall victim to the snakes or the stereotypical portrayal of indigenous guides, were cliched and could have been handled with more nuance. These reflections highlight evolving audience expectations for diversity and representation in genre films. Ultimately, Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid offered audiences a blend of suspense, action, and adventure that catered to both casual moviegoers and dedicated genre fans. Its ability to evoke fear, excitement, and occasional humor enabled it to carve out a space in early 21st century pop culture. The film's reception and ongoing fan engagement illustrate how audiences can find meaning and enjoyment in films that operate within familiar formulas, especially when those films successfully deliver entertainment and atmosphere. In Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, character development is woven into the survival horror framework, where the jungle environment and the threat of the giant snakes act as catalysts for revealing deeper layers of the characters. While the film is primarily driven by action and suspense, it offers enough complexity in its main characters' arcs to provide emotional investment and thematic resonance. The growth and transformation of key figures highlight human traits such as ambition, morality, fear, and sacrifice. The narrative leverages these character journeys to intensify the stakes, making the fight for survival more than just a physical struggle but a psychological and ethical one as well. The protagonist, Dr. Jack Byron, is introduced as a driven, ambitious scientist whose primary motivation is the commercial exploitation of the Blood Orchid's properties. At the outset, Byron appears as an archetypal antihero, cold, pragmatic, and dismissive of his team's safety in favor of his personal goals. Over the course of the film, Byron's arc reveals the corrosive effects of greed and hubris. His willingness to push the expedition into dangerous territory, manipulate others, and sacrifice lives underscores his moral decline. While he remains largely self-serving until the climax, moments of vulnerability expose cracks in his facade, especially as the lethal consequences of his decisions become apparent. Byron's eventual confrontation with nature's fury serves as both a literal and symbolic reckoning for his character. His arc embodies the classic narrative of man's destructive desire for control over nature, leading to downfall. In contrast, Samantha Rogers serves as the moral compass and emotional center of the group. As a herpetologist dedicated to scientific discovery rather than profit, Samantha's motivations are grounded in respect for nature and the pursuit of knowledge. Her character arc involves moving from cautious skepticism about the expedition's purpose to taking decisive action to protect her team and the environment. Throughout the film, Samantha exhibits increasing resilience and leadership, stepping up as others falter. Her interactions with Jack Byron highlight the ethical conflicts at play as she challenges his ruthless pragmatism with empathy and reason. Samantha's growth culminates in her survival and implicit commitment to preserving the blood orchid rather than exploiting it, reinforcing themes of conservation and respect for nature. Gordon Mitchell, the expedition's financier and a man caught between profit and survival, experiences an arc marked by pragmatism tempered by growing fear and responsibility. Initially motivated by financial gain, Gordon's character reveals layers of pragmatism and wit, often providing levity amid the tension. As the journey progresses and the dangers intensify, Gordon's priorities shift from business interests to protecting his own life and that of the team. His pragmatic nature makes him a foil to the more idealistic Samantha and the self-serving Byron. Gordon's arc underscores the film's survival theme as he adapts to the hostile environment by relying on common sense and courage, traits that earn him audience sympathy. Burris, the team's technical expert, starts as a somewhat secondary figure whose humor and sarcasm serve to lighten the mood. His character arc is subtle but important, evolving from comic relief to someone who takes on more responsibility as the expedition's conditions worsen. Cole's growing awareness of the stakes and his increasing investment in the team's survival humanize him. His transformation from a carefree personality to a committed survivor mirrors the film's escalation from adventure to life-or-death crisis. Dr. Ben Douglas, the idealistic scientist, brings a touch of optimism and ethical concern to the group. His arc revolves around maintaining hope and a sense of morality in the face of danger. Ben's interactions with Samantha often emphasize the scientific and humanitarian aspects of the mission, contrasting with Byron's cold calculation. While his character faces peril early on, Ben's integrity remains intact, symbolizing the human desire to do good even in dire circumstances. The supporting characters, such as Gail Stern and Bill Johnson, experience more limited development but serve important functions in highlighting different facets of human nature. Gail Stern's corporate role emphasizes the intersection of commerce and science, often creating tension within the group's dynamics. Bill Johnson, the boat captain, embodies rugged pragmatism and courage, providing physical protection and occasional emotional support. His understated romantic connection with Samantha adds a humanizing dimension to the narrative, illustrating personal bonds forged in crisis. The local guides, including Tran, though less developed, represent the link between the external world and the jungle's mysteries. Their presence underscores cultural and environmental themes, reminding audiences that the jungle is not just a backdrop but a living, breathing entity with its own dangers and wisdom. The characters' interactions throughout the film deepen the story's emotional weight. Conflicts arise not only from external threats but also from differing philosophies and survival strategies. The tensions between Jack Byron's ruthless ambition and Samantha's ethical concerns drive much of the dramatic conflict, while camaraderie and trust among the survivors provide moments of relief and hope. These interpersonal dynamics enrich the narrative, making the characters' fates more impactful. Ultimately, Anacondas, the hunt for the blood orchid uses character development to elevate its survival horror premise. The characters' arcs underscore key themes such as the dangers of greed, the importance of respect for nature, and the resilience of the human spirit. While constrained by the film's genre conventions and pacing, the performances and narrative choices allow viewers to connect with the characters' struggles and transformations. Their journeys from ambition or skepticism to survival and self-awareness provide a compelling human dimension to the thrilling spectacle of giant snakes and jungle peril. The costume and set design in Anacondas, the hunt for the blood orchid play crucial roles in establishing the film's immersive environment, helping to transport audiences deep into the perilous jungles of Borneo where the story unfolds. While the film's budget did not allow for extravagant or elaborate design work, the creative choices made by the costume and set departments contributed significantly to the tone, mood, and believability of the narrative. Through careful attention to detail, these elements communicated essential information about characters, setting, and the unfolding drama. Costumes in the film largely reflect the practical needs of a high-stakes jungle expedition, combined with subtle hints of personality and backstory for each character. The filmmakers avoided overly stylized or glamorous attire, instead favoring utilitarian clothing appropriate for the humid, dangerous tropical environment. The cast's wardrobe mostly consisted of breathable fabrics, earth tones, cargo pants, hiking boots, and accessories such as utility belts and backpacks. This approach grounded the characters in realism, emphasizing their roles as scientists, adventurers, and professionals rather than heroes in a fantasy. The dusty, worn look of the clothing also signaled the passage of time and the harsh conditions of the jungle, adding an organic texture to the film's visual fabric. KaDee Strickland's character, Samantha Rogers, is frequently seen in practical yet slightly form-fitting attire that blends functionality with a subtle indication of her professional competence and independent spirit. Her costume choices, ranging from short-sleeve shirts to rugged vests, helped position her as the strong female lead capable of navigating the physical and intellectual challenges of the mission. The costume design reflected a balance between vulnerability and empowerment, using simplicity to underline her character's authenticity rather than resorting to clichés or sexualization often seen in genre films. Matthew Marsden's Dr. Jack Byron is dressed to reflect his status as the cold, profit-driven expedition leader. His costumes incorporate slightly more formal elements compared to the rest of the team, such as button-up shirts and polished boots, which suggest his desire to maintain control and authority amidst chaos. The contrast between his clothing and the more casual expedition attire subtly emphasizes his detachment from the immediate dangers the group faces. This wardrobe choice helps the audience quickly identify his role as the antagonist, visually reinforcing his pragmatic, self-interested personality. Morris Chestnut's character, Gordon Mitchell, wears practical expedition gear but with a more relaxed fit and casual style that conveys his pragmatic yet approachable nature. His costumes often include durable fabrics and accessories like hats and sunglasses, which also serve a functional purpose by protecting him from the harsh jungle sun. The practicality of his costume design complements his role as the team's grounding force and voice of reason. The supporting characters' costumes follow a similar utilitarian approach, with subtle variations that reflect individual personalities and roles. For example, Eugene Byrd's character Burris sports slightly more casual clothing, reflecting his tech-savvy and somewhat irreverent demeanor. Salli Richardson-Whitfield's corporate liaison character is given attire that blends professional elements with jungle-ready modifications, illustrating her dual role as both a business representative and a survivalist when necessary. Regarding set design, the film's primary environment, the dense Bornean jungle, is a character in itself, meticulously crafted through a combination of on-location shooting and soundstage sets. The production used actual jungle locations in Malaysia, which lent authenticity to the visuals and helped immerse the cast and crew in the film's naturalistic setting. The lush foliage, winding rivers, and misty rainforests are not merely backdrops, but integral to the atmosphere of suspense and danger. The choice of shooting in real jungle locations also created significant challenges for the production team, but it paid off in a visual richness that studio sets alone could not have achieved. Interior sets, such as the expedition camp and the makeshift laboratories where the team studies the Blood Orchid, were designed with attention to realism and functionality. These sets featured weathered tents, scientific equipment, and survival gear that conveyed a sense of urgency and impermanence. The camp's cluttered, utilitarian look added to the film's sense of authenticity, highlighting the rough-and-ready nature of the expedition. Props such as maps, notebooks, specimen containers, and communication devices were carefully chosen to reinforce the scientific and exploratory themes. The set design also included the occasional use of man-made structures or remnants within the jungle, such as abandoned buildings or ancient ruins hinted at in the background. These subtle inclusions enriched the narrative by suggesting a history of exploration and danger tied to the Blood Orchid's legend. They added depth to the film's world-building and served as visual metaphors for the unknown perils lurking beneath the jungle's surface. One of the most important aspects of both costume and set design in Anacondas is the interplay between the natural environment and human intrusion. The juxtaposition of high-tech scientific equipment with the raw, untamed jungle highlighted the film's recurring tension between human ambition and nature's unpredictability. The worn and practical costumes underscored the vulnerability of the characters, while the meticulously recreated jungle settings underscored the overwhelming power of the natural world. In summary, while the costume and set design of Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid may not be flashy or overtly stylized, they perform essential narrative and atmospheric functions. By grounding the characters visually in a believable and hostile environment, these design elements deepen audience immersion and enhance the story's tension. Through careful choices in clothing and environmental details, the film successfully conveys the harsh realities of jungle exploration, the complexity of the characters' roles, and the overarching theme of human confrontation with nature's mysteries and dangers. The dialogue and scriptwriting of Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid, play a crucial role in shaping the film's tone, pacing, and overall viewer engagement. While the screenplay operates within the conventions of a mid-budget horror-adventure movie, its strengths and weaknesses significantly impact the audience's experience and the film's narrative coherence. The script was penned with the primary aim of delivering a fast-paced, thrilling adventure story punctuated by moments of suspense and character interaction that drive the plot forward. The dialogue reflects this focus, often prioritizing exposition and plot advancement over nuanced character development. Characters frequently exchange information about the Blood Orchid, the dangers lurking in the jungle, and their individual motivations, which helps ground the audience in the unfolding story. However, these exchanges occasionally feel overtly functional, lacking subtlety or naturalism. Memorable lines in the film tend to be those that underscore the high-stakes environment or provide comic relief amid the tension. For example, sarcastic remarks or quips delivered by characters like Burris serve to alleviate the growing anxiety of the jungle setting. These moments of levity are essential in balancing the film's darker, more suspenseful sequences. Unfortunately, some attempts at humor fall flat or feel forced, revealing the challenge of blending horror with action comedy elements without disrupting the film's pacing. One notable aspect of the dialogue is its tendency to rely on genre clichés and familiar tropes. Lines such as warnings about the dangers ahead, doubts about the success of the mission, or declarations of personal resolve are staples in adventure horror screenplays. While this can contribute to audience expectations and genre comfort, it also means the dialogue rarely surprises or innovates. This predictability can sometimes detract from the sense of urgency, as viewers may anticipate certain outcomes based on well-worn phrases and exchanges. The script's handling of exposition is both a strength and a limitation. Early scenes use dialogue efficiently to explain the scientific premise of the Blood Orchid and its significance, which is necessary given the complex backstory carried over from the original Anaconda film. However, this exposition sometimes comes across as heavy-handed, delivered in ways that feel like characters speaking directly to the audience rather than natural conversation. This info-dumping is a common challenge in genre films that require intricate background setup while maintaining narrative momentum. Character interactions in the script help define relationships and individual motivations, though they often stay on the surface. For example, Samantha Rogers and Jack Byron's exchanges reveal their conflicting approaches, scientific curiosity versus corporate greed, providing a basis for tension. However, the dialogue rarely delves deeply into emotional complexity or psychological depth. Similarly, the camaraderie among team members is conveyed through straightforward conversations, with little exploration of personal histories or inner conflicts. The script also uses dialogue to build suspense and foreshadow danger. Characters frequently voice fears or suspicions that hint at the threats ahead, which primes the audience for upcoming scenes involving the giant anacondas. These moments are important for maintaining tension but can sometimes feel repetitive or overly explicit, reducing the element of surprise. In terms of pacing, the script balances dialogue-driven scenes with action sequences. Conversations tend to be concise, serving as bridges between moments of physical peril. This structure supports a rhythm that keeps the story moving quickly, a necessity in a film where survival depends on quick decisions and reactions. However, This brisk pace occasionally sacrifices character development, as there is little time for quieter, introspective moments. The screenplay's tone fluctuates between serious adventure and lighthearted fun. While this tonal mix is typical for creature features aiming to appeal to a broad audience, the transitions are sometimes abrupt. The dialogue reflects this, shifting from urgent warnings to casual banter in ways that may jar some viewers. Nevertheless, this oscillation contributes to the film's charm for fans of the genre, who appreciate a blend of thrills and humor. Overall, the script for Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, serves its primary purpose of delivering a thrilling jungle adventure with moments of suspense and character interplay. While it does not break new ground in terms of dialogue sophistication or narrative depth, it effectively supports the film's plot and mood. Its reliance on genre conventions and occasional heavy-handed exposition are offset by engaging interactions and pacing that maintain audience interest throughout the film's runtime. The marketing and promotional strategy for Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, reflected the film's position as a mid-tier, genre-specific sequel designed to capitalize on the existing Anaconda brand and the popularity of creature feature films during the early 2000s. The campaign was built around highlighting the film's exotic setting, the perilous hunt for the mysterious blood orchid, and the thrilling encounters with giant anacondas lurking in the jungle. While it did not have the massive budget of blockbuster marketing campaigns, the promotional efforts employed several effective and targeted methods to generate awareness and interest among horror and adventure movie fans. One of the primary marketing tools was the theatrical trailer, which debuted several months before the film's release. The trailer was fast-paced and suspenseful, showcasing intense scenes of the giant snakes attacking the expedition team amidst the lush, foreboding jungle backdrop. It emphasized the film's action and horror elements, mixing glimpses of the blood orchid's mystique with close calls and moments of terror. The voiceover narration and text elements in the trailer underscored the deadly stakes and the mysterious scientific quest at the film's core. The trailer was featured in cinemas preceding other horror or adventure movies, as well as on cable TV channels known for genre programming, ensuring it reached a targeted audience. Movie posters and key art played a critical role in the campaign. The primary poster featured a giant anaconda's menacing head emerging from dark jungle foliage, with the blood orchid flower subtly highlighted in the background. The tagline, "Some snakes are deadly, some are deadly dangerous," was designed to entice fans of horror and monster films by promising a step up in menace from the original Anaconda. Additional posters and lobby cards presented the main characters in tense poses, surrounded by the creeping danger of the snakes and the exotic jungle environment. These visuals were used widely in theaters, video rental stores, and later in DVD packaging. Television and print advertisements were targeted toward genre enthusiasts, appearing in horror and science fiction magazines and on TV channels specializing in thrillers and adventure content. The promotional materials emphasized the film's thrilling adventure and creature horror aspects, appealing to audiences seeking an adrenaline-fueled movie experience. Press kits sent to reviewers and media outlets included high-quality stills, cast biographies, and behind-the-scenes information, which helped generate coverage in entertainment magazines and online portals. The marketing campaign also leveraged the burgeoning internet platforms of the early 2000s. An official website was launched featuring trailers, character bios, production notes, and interactive content like downloadable wallpapers and screensavers. The site provided fans with a central hub for news and updates and also included forums where viewers could discuss the film. Though social media, as we know it today, was still in its infancy, the film's digital presence allowed for early forms of viral marketing, particularly through fan communities dedicated to horror and adventure movies. In addition to traditional marketing, Anacondas was promoted through cross-media tie-ins that helped expand its reach. For example, the film was featured in genre film festivals and special screenings that drew horror aficionados. Tie-in merchandise was limited but included branded posters, collectible items such as replica blood orchid pins, and promotional giveaways during theatrical runs. These items became popular among fans who enjoyed the cult appeal of the film. The timing of the release was also part of the marketing strategy. The film premiered during the summer months, a season typically reserved for big-budget blockbusters, but also known for attracting audiences seeking genre films that provided thrills outside of mainstream superhero and action fare. This scheduling allowed Anacondas to capture attention as a refreshing alternative for moviegoers looking for horror adventure in an exotic setting. Interviews and press tours featuring the cast and crew further supported the promotional push. Actors discussed their experiences working in the challenging jungle environments and shared anecdotes that humanized the production and engaged fans. Director Dwight H. Little emphasized the film's blend of horror, adventure, and suspense, positioning it as a worthy follow-up to the original Anaconda. These appearances in entertainment media helped maintain buzz in the lead-up to the film's release. While Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid did not employ some of the more elaborate or viral marketing campaigns seen in other contemporary blockbusters, its focus strategy effectively targeted its core demographic of horror and adventure fans. By leveraging the established Anaconda brand, emphasizing thrilling visuals, and creating a solid digital and print presence, the film successfully positioned itself as a must-see for audiences interested in jungle monster movies and creature features. When examining Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid within the broader context of similar films and the director's oeuvre, it becomes clear that the movie occupies a specific niche in early 2000s adventure horror cinema. Comparing it to its predecessor, related creature features and other films in the same genre reveals notable differences in tone, style, and storytelling that help define its unique position. Firstly, as a sequel to the 1997 Anaconda film, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid diverges significantly in atmosphere and narrative focus. The original Anaconda, directed by Luis Loza, blended thriller elements with a more self-aware, sometimes campy tone, buoyed by the presence of high-profile actors like Jennifer Lopez and Jon Voight. The first film balanced suspense and horror with moments of dark humor and over-the-top action sequences. Its style was more tongue-in-cheek, playing with genre conventions in a way that flirted with parody. In contrast, Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid adopts a more earnest, straightforward adventure horror approach. Directed by Dwight Little, known for his work in genre films such as Halloween 4 and Marked for Death, the film takes itself more seriously, emphasizing jungle exploration, scientific mystery, and survival. The tone is less campy and more focused on building tension through environment and creature effects, though it still suffers from some genre cliches. This tonal shift reflects a different directorial sensibility and an attempt to position the sequel as a grittier, more atmospheric outing rather than a quirky thriller. Comparing Anacondas to other creature features of its era also highlights distinctive and shared characteristics. For example, movies like Lake Placid, 1999, which centered on a giant crocodile, and Deep Blue Sea, 1999, featuring genetically enhanced sharks, shared similar themes of humans confronting monstrous animals in contained environments. Anacondas differentiates itself through its jungle setting, adding an element of exoticism and exploration. While Lake Placid and Deep Blue Sea often incorporated humor and a faster pace, Anacondas leans more heavily on suspense and slow-building dread through dense, claustrophobic foliage and the mystery of the blood orchid. In terms of visual style and effects, Anacondas employed a blend of practical animatronics and CGI that was typical for the time. While not as polished as some contemporaries with larger budgets, the film's creature design aimed for realism within the constraints of its production. Compared to the first Anaconda film, which relied more heavily on practical effects, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid made greater use of CGI, a choice that divided audience reactions. Some appreciated the more fluid movement of the snakes, while others felt the CGI lacked convincing texture and scale. Narratively, Anacondas aligns with a common genre formula of an expedition team venturing into hostile territory with conflicting goals and personalities. This structure mirrors films like Predator, 1987, and The Ruins, 2008, where group dynamics and environmental hazards heighten tension. However, Anacondas introduces the scientific quest for the blood orchid as a central MacGuffin, adding a layer of pseudo-scientific intrigue absent from more straightforward kill-or-be-killed narratives. This element places it closer to adventure films like Indiana Jones or The Lost World, Jurassic Park in terms of motivation, albeit with a much lower budget and more modest execution. Looking at director Dwight Little's other works, Anacondas fits into his pattern of directing genre films with strong action and suspense elements, but relatively simple plots. His previous film Halloween 4 was notable for revitalizing a major horror franchise with efficient storytelling and tight pacing, while Marked for Death combined crime thriller with martial arts action. In Anacondas, Little's strengths in maintaining tension and choreographing action sequences are evident, though the film's script and effects limit its overall impact. Compared to these other works, Anacondas is less polished, but still showcases Little's ability to create atmospheric suspense within genre constraints. Comparatively, Anacondas is often overshadowed by bigger-budget creature features such as Jurassic Park, 1993, which set a high bar for combining cutting-edge effects with compelling storytelling and character development. While Anacondas borrows elements from the jungle adventure and creature horror genres popularized by Jurassic Park and its sequels, it lacks the narrative depth, emotional stakes, and groundbreaking visuals that made those films iconic. However, it compensates by embracing B-movie charm and delivering straightforward thrills to genre enthusiasts. In sum, Anacondas, the hunt for the Blood Orchid occupies a mid-tier position in creature feature cinema. It is more serious in tone than its predecessor but less sophisticated than larger franchise entries in the genre. Its storytelling is functional but not innovative, its effects competent but unremarkable, and its characters archetypal but serviceable. Yet, when compared to similar films of the era, it holds a place as a solid example of early 2000s jungle horror, blending adventure, suspense, and creature thrills with a distinct focus on scientific exploration. This combination sets it apart from pure monster movies or horror comedy hybrids and defines its legacy as a cult favorite among fans of niche genre cinema.